In 1935, Doris Duke, who had just then married James Cromwell, set off on a tour that took them to Jordan and Egypt, then to India, where they spent 2 months. Doris Duke's travels in India left a deep impression and would result in a lifelong commitment to collecting Indian and Islamic art. Over the next 50 years, she built up a large collection of paintings, jewellery, textiles, and which she collected from over the Indian subcontinent. In her India collection, we see a predominance of objects with floral motifs. Perhaps she had been enthralled by the floral design that she had encountered at the Taj Mahal, a Mughal garden tomb built by the Emperor Shah Jahan. This interest in Mughal floral design had led her to commission a Mughal-style bedroom and bath at Shangri-La, which replicated the floral motifs that she had seen at the Taj. Along with this commission, we also see a large body of 18th and 19th century objects in her collection with similar floral patterns, symmetrical, almost naturalistic, flowering plants rising from a small mound. Take, for instance, this gold miniature shrine she had acquired from the city of Jaipur in Western India. We know that the shrine enters the Shangri-La collection in 1961, when Doris Duke personally brought the shrine to her Hawaii residence. The shrine is intricately decorated with floral motifs and semi-precious stones. The base is a block of lapis lazuli, surrounded by an enamel balustrade, which also has floral motifs on the sides. The miniature columns, which supports the canopy, are inset with gems, diamonds and emeralds. Again, we can see the floral motif on the top of the canopy. The shrine becomes especially interesting because not only does it allow us to talk about enamel work in 19th century Jaipur, but one can read from its very form a history of design, politics, cultural borrowing, relationships between the Islamic Mughal Empire and the regional centers in North India. So let's start by thinking how this shrine would be used. The photograph shows the Govindev temple in the city of Jaipur, established in 1735. One of the most important temples in the city. In fact, we know that the ruling house of Jaipur had declared the icon in the temple as the lord of the kingdom, and they ruled in his name, in the name of Govindev. So Govindev, the icon that we see in the photograph, was the ruler of the kingdom of Jaipur. The photograph shows how the throne or the shrine would have been used in a temple. While the throne at the temple is not exactly like the one in the Doris Duke collection, it nevertheless gives us an idea of how thrones were used as framing devices in liturgical practices. The size of this throne suggests that this would perhaps be used in a personal shrine in someone's home rather than in a public temple. One has to imagine that there would be a small icon of Krishna in the center of the shrine. He would be dressed beautifully, there would be jewelry adorning him, fresh flowers, incense, the camphor lamp. An opulent vision of a beautiful young boy. Seeing and ornamenting Krishna's body is a means of expressing love. And texts from the 16th century reiterate the importance of clothes and jewelry in ritualistic practices, asserting that embellishment through ornament stimulates the devotee's love for the Lord. This emphasis on floral imagery that we see on the shrine, for instance on the balustrade or even on the canopy, is quite understandable. Krishna was a cowherd who grew up in the groves and forests of Vrindavan. The groves in Vrindavan were enchanted spaces, a transcendental realm where Krishna and his consort Radha joined each other in ecstatic love. The emphasis on the sensuous topography of the enchanted grove in poetry had a striking parallel in paintings from the 16th century onwards that depicted Krishna and Radha in pastoral settings framed by a canopy of flowering vines. The artisan who created this particular shrine perhaps attempted to recreate that dark, secretive groves of Vrindavan by covering the canopy with floral imagery. When we see the beautiful Krishna resplendent in this shrine, we are reminded of the sweet-smelling groves of Vrindavan. Thus, the shrine allows for a recreation of that poetic and theological imaginary that gives us a direct corporeal experience of Vrindavan when we look at Krishna set in the shrine. But a closer analysis of the floral motif, for instance the motif in front of the balustrade, complicates this metaphor further. We see a flowering plant, naturalistic in appearance, yet formally posed and arranged against a plain background. We know that this motif was first developed around the 16th century under the patronage of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. Large flowering plants at well-spaced intervals appear at Shah Jahan's Red Fort in Delhi and at the Taj. This naturalistic depiction of flowering plants is seen as a culmination of Mughal interest in botanical studies that began under his father Jahangir. It is said that a 1620 visit to the gardens of Kashmir had inspired Jahangir to direct the court artist Mansoor to paint flowers that grace the valleys of Kashmir. Very soon this motif appears in architecture, painting, textiles, and even jewellery. While the use of floral decoration in Shah Jahan's building created a paradise on earth for the Mughal emperor, this Quranic symbolism, articulated through floral motif, may well have resonated with the imaginings of Vrindavan as a bejewelled forest where Krishna dallied with his consort Radha. The artisan who designed this shrine then drew on two discrete symbolisms, Shah Jahan's royal allegories and the imagining of Vrindavan as a lush forest to create a visual language that linked Mughal visual culture to the visual culture of Krishna worship. The connections to Mughal visual culture is further reiterated through the four columns that support the canopy on top. The bulbous baluster columns we see here was first introduced by Shah Jahan and used exclusively for Mughal royal architecture. Within a Mughal context, these columns with their European origins posited the emperor as a universal monarch and served as a reference to Shah Jahan's imperial might. This shrine in Jaipur shared this visual language of Mughal power, citing both the bulbous columns and the floral motifs that adorned Mughal architecture. In effect, Krishna, a Hindu god, was framed through architectural devices customarily used to frame the Muslim Mughal emperor. Even in the 19th century, we see that the vocabulary of design in Jaipur remained indebted to the rich visualities of the Mughal court. Framed by Mughal columns and floral imagery, Krishna then became the cosmopolitan monarch, a royal figure of veneration and worship. But why in the 19th century? By the 19th century, much of India had been colonized by the British. The process of modernization had set in. Krishna worship was being ridiculed by the progressive press as well as the British government as vulgar, obscene. The erotic love of Radha and Krishna in the groves of Vrindavan was seen as lewd by both the British and the westernized Indian middle class. The emphasis on floral imagery celebrated that very aspect of Krishna worship, the eroticism of the love of Radha and Krishna, that was being censored by progressive Hindus who tried to recreate Krishna worship in the image of a Judeo-Christian omnipresent divine. Did this appropriation of earlier Islamic courtly cultures and the recalling of the eroticism of Krishna in Vrindavan through floral imagery then allow for a new reconfiguring of Hinduism that resisted colonial modernity? Although an innocuous object of daily use, the shrine allows us to study how material culture allowed for a reframing of the theological, the political, and even the cultural in the 19th century. How might this astounding moment of cross-cultural transgression impact our understanding of the 19th century more broadly? Some questions that the shrine allows us to reflect on.